Good morning, everyone. Are we all well? Okay, thank you for that, Jason. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak today and help out. We'll do brief introductions first. There's lots here, there's too many to go around everyone, so as you speak later on and you input, please say who you are and where you're from. That'd be great, so everyone knows. Sherry, would you just like to introduce yourself first?
So my name is Sherry Limars. I'm here with Net Prosecution. Simple as that.
That was short and sharp. Okay, I'm Jimmy Brannigan, co-director with Sherry Lee. My background is mixed corporate sector. I spent 5 years running all the global programs for WWF International, the Panda people. If anyone had any doubts about what I meant by WWF. That took me into different parts of the world, working with corporate leaders on sustainable procurement and CSR, etc. Back in the UK, spent a lot of time in that area as well. And we work extensively now, amongst other sectors, with the HE sector. Is there anyone from the HE sector here? Excellent. What that actually means is you're going to get a cracking case study of how they're taking sustainable procurement forward. It's one of the things we've always believed, that sectors can learn from each other, whether that's higher education, further education, corporate, governance sectors, if you like. So how do we learn from each other? So what we're going to do today is talk about sustainable procurement and modern slavery. The first question I've got, and just mumble yes or show your hands or however you want to respond, is modern slavery an issue that you're addressing, addressed, or thinking about? Yeah? Okay, so hopefully this will be of use. This is an approach that the HE sector is taking. And when I say the HE sector, who we work with, we've just launched a set of guidance materials that we worked in partnership with Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, Imperial and the University of Manchester, which have just gone live. So we work with a lot of the major universities. So what we're going to do over the next 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and we'll be encouraging questions, is tell you a little bit about the concept of net positive sustainability, very briefly. Are you familiar with the term net positive? Has anyone come out anywhere on the internet seen the concept of net positive sustainability? Anyone heard of Kingfisher? Yeah? Their sustainability strategy? Net positive. Concept of net positive. IKEA, Lafarge, I'm trying to think of that gold mining company in South Africa. So the concept of net positive sustainability, we'll say in a couple of minutes just to give you a bit of context. I want to talk about risks and opportunities in sustainable procurement. A risk versus opportunity. We want to put this in the context of the Modern Slavery Act and actually suggest something that you may or may have not been thinking, which is actually how do we move from supplier engagement to supplier development? Is there any social value, any corporate value in thinking about the supply chain as something we should be actively developing? Now, this might be not new to you because that's what you do. However, in the HE sector, that shift from audit to engagement to development is one that's been taking place over the past 2 or 3 years. And that's based around resource intensity. So this idea of shifting from just engagement to how do we actually develop. But firstly, a little bit about net positive sustainability. I won't try and explain all this diagram, but I assume Jason will, and Jason's now outside, I assume you'll get a slide pack and you'll get access to all these slides. The idea of net positive sustainability is a simple one at its heart. And I think personally, every procurement director and anyone engaged with procurement at all should understand this personally. And it's the idea that actually sustainability is not just about reducing negative environmental impacts. Historically, in facilities management, for example, where a lot of early environmental and sustainability activity took place, what they actually said is sustainability is just about the environment. We go back a few years now, it's just about the environment, and our job within an organisation, within procurement, is about reducing the negative environmental impacts associated with activity. Does that ring a bell with anyone? The idea of reduce, cut, minimise, stop. Sustainability actually in terms of the agenda becomes a negative agenda because it's about reducing impact. It's about stopping, it's about changing behaviour. The idea of net positive sustainability is a simple one that says, yes, our responsibility as a large organisation is to reduce our negative impacts, but actually don't we add some value somewhere? Don't we have a contribution socially and economically that we make through paying our taxes, through actually the way we employ people, with the way we engage with the community? So actually sustainability at its simplest level, becomes actually not only thinking about the environmental agenda, but thinking about the socio-economic agenda. To many of you, that won't be news. To many of you, you'll have heard of it in the context of the triple bottom line. To many of your organisations, you might have separated sustainability and that's environmental sustainability over here and corporate social responsibility over here. What we're saying, actually, it's all the same thing. So this idea of net positive sustainability actually is one that's caught on. And if you Google it, when you take the time to Google it, you'll see that the idea of net positive sustainability is now infiltrating corporate language and corporate speak in the sustainability and CSR world quite rapidly. So to summarise, when we talk about net positive sustainability, we talk about managing and reducing the environmental impact of our activity. We can stop and cut those negatives, but what we can also do is enhance our social and economic contribution. Why am I telling people from a procurement, facilities management background this? The reason I'm telling you this or suggesting that this is important is because procurement has a major role then in delivering social value, corporate social responsibility and sustainability for your organisations. Procurement has one of the key roles in delivering sustainability strategy for the organisations. You deliver value for money, of course, you save costs, you reduce risk, but what I'm saying is a thought piece at the very start of today is the value you can add in terms of sustainability under this concept is massive. And that's what the HE sector has started to try to do, and I want to share some of that today. So sustainability excellence then is actually simply a way of making decisions. If we accept that it's not just about reducing environmental impacts, then what sustainability is, and please reflect on this afterwards and see whether it resonates. Sustainability is just how we make decisions. It's how we consider environmental, social, economic implications, how we take a long-term perspective, how we enhance the contribution of what we do, and how we reduce the negative impact of what we do. If that's true, or if that's a way of thinking, then actually sustainable procurement becomes doing procurement by doing that. Excellent procurement is buying things whilst we consider the environmental, social, and economic implications, take a long-term perspective because of security of supply, etc., actually enhance the contribution we make and reduce the negative impacts of procurement. So again, I'll leave that to dwell on that, and if you want to go back to that towards the end of the session in questions, please do. This concept of sustainability is broadly being accepted by many corporates now, and also the HE sector has adopted it. Sherry, did you want to add something there? As part of the work we did with the starting point of net positive sustainability, we had a look at what the impacts of organisations are, and we asked the question different or the same. Sherry?
So I didn't say very much about my background. I'm much older than I look, and I've been working with in sustainability in HE for, I keep saying 15 years, but I've been saying that for so long I really need to have a reassess, 15, 20 years. And although you would expect HE to be a fairly homogenous group, they are all universities, they are all delivering teaching, learning, research, they are very, very oddly unique individual organisations. So that our starting point is always, whatever that university is, what is it about your organisation that makes you different? And we've worked with 20, 30, 40 universities and work with them a lot and work with different teams within the universities, and they're all very keen to tell us how different and unique their organisation is. And to understand sustainability and to understand it within the context of my university, you have to understand my university, which we accept. And we do. But essentially, when you actually drill down, however different they think they are, and whatever the different context or however different their campuses look, in terms of sustainability, they are essentially all talking about the same sorts of things around sustainability. So we did a piece of work which was to take the sustainability strategic documentation from these universities, and I'd like to say we put it into a machine, but we didn't. We gave it to a colleague who said, please never give me this to do again because it's really tedious. And she picked out all of the key words And the key words from the sustainability strategy document for all of these very different universities. Now, I've worked at some of these and we've worked with most of them, and they are all very different. They look different, they have different cultures, they're situated in very different places. Some are rural, some are urban, some are small, some are large, some have very, very specific types of students, but essentially they are all saying very similar things. And when you put those words into a simple wordle, which is the more times the word appears, the larger it will be on this diagram. They are essentially chunked up into environmental, reducing pollution, reducing waste, energy use, emissions, travel. So they're talking about the traditional energy, waste, water, travel, preventing pollution. Quite traditional sustainability, environmental sustainability issues.
Yeah.
So, for different universities, however different they perceive themselves to be, on this agenda they're talking about the same kinds of things. Would you, any of you, look at this and think, actually, we talk about those things? Yeah. Most of you.
And the reason you would is all organisational impacts are the same. So, are you familiar with the concept of materiality analysis? No? Tell me. Yes, no? Okay, it's a term that's used in the sustainability world rather than the sustainable procurement world. And what we do is we look at what the material issues for our business to help determine our sustainability strategy. But if you think of what businesses do generally, and I'm going to generalise for a second, you buy things, you travel, you produce things, or you provide a service, you produce waste, you use energy, you consume water. Am I along the right lines? We all do the same sort of things. Therefore, why wouldn't our impacts be broadly the same? Broadly. Obviously, if I make specialist engineering equipment or I produce rubber tyres, there's certain customised impacts that are relevant, and there are certainly different supply chains and therefore different issues in the supply chain. But broadly, we actually all do pretty much the same things with different nuances. Yeah. So when we showed the universities this and went, actually, all of your sustainability and some of the CSR strategies, you all do the same thing, that wasn't really news to them, but it opened their eyes.
Let's go back a slide. So these icons I borrowed from the University of Manchester, and I'd had them designed to reflect what they believe were sustainability issues for their organisation. And I put them up mainly because I forget what they all mean, but they reflect two things. One, a breadth now beyond that traditional approach into areas that are pertinent particularly to their business. So we've got things that reflect the teaching and learning, things like well-being, which I believe is the sporty one, food, finances, construction, energy and travel are still in there, but they are having to broaden what they understand by the term sustainability. And the reason I'm honest about the fact that it's a Manchester one is partly because I'm very honest, wouldn't want to just appropriate, but they are leading the way on this for the HE sector in terms of that breadth of understanding. Now, some of you look very youthful too, but how many of you, while you've been working in, and I'm going to assume procurement just for the purposes of this, have seen what procurement relates to broader? So is it just buying of stuff, or is it starting to impact on buying of people and broader? Is it being stretched? Yeah, there's some nodding. It's exactly the same as sustainability, guys. There's a slight stretch, and at the moment we're trying to work out how far to stretch it, and just include everything, or where to set some of those boundaries. And I think that's part of this, exploring exactly what those issues are for those organisations.
Okay, so just to recap, all the universities, when they talk about sustainability and CSR, say the same things, have the same impacts, broadly talk about environmental, large things. There's a little bit of social in terms of staff and student engagement. Sustainable procurement gets a mention, but broadly it's environmentally focused. It's focused on reducing negative impacts, and they all do pretty much the same thing. I mentioned the sort of idea of net positive, and basically, forget the language. I mean, we're trying to sell net positive language to you. That's irrelevant. What we're saying is that actually you consider the environmental, social, economic positive and negative, then actually you can look at the world a different way, and this is highly pertinent to procurement. So An exercise that actually we did, and there's free guidance available for this on the HEPA website, which we'll make sure is included in the notes, so you can actually have a look if you're interested in this guidance. What we actually developed with the HE sector is a really simple approach to looking at the environmental, social, economic impact of certain commodities. So basically, we take something that you buy, it might be a commodity, it can be something like that. And we go, okay, we're buying bottled water. What are the environmental, social, and economic impacts associated with buying water? Does that make sense? So it's the glass, it's the energy going into the glass, it's the water itself in terms of, it's the distribution, it's the use when we've actually finished drinking this water, it's the waste associated with the bottle. Does that make sense? People are employed, where does the water travel from? So I can actually do an impact analysis on that bottle of water as I can on that, as I can on the carpet, which is full of oil. Can you see where I'm going? So we think about that, and we can chunk it up into commodities, or we can think about it in terms of individual purchases, and we can apply it to people as well, in terms of the social dimension. And what we actually did is identify the top 50 under Proc HE codes, it doesn't matter, but basically a certain coding the HE sector use, and looked at 50 of their high spend and perceived high risk commodities. Make sense? Yeah, we identified the 50 using a Marrakesh process, which was promoted by government, etc., etc. And we identified, and for each one of them, we got a team together to identify the positive and negative environmental, social, economic impacts of those commodities. Why would we do that? Well, the reason we do it is because if we're going to do sustainable procurement and engage with suppliers on what the environmental, social issues are associated with what we're buying, we should have an idea ourselves first to put into the specification, to actually ask sensible questions. When your suppliers send you an environmental policy, do you know whether it's good or not? How do you know? You have to have thought about it beforehand. So this process equips the procurement professionals at the start of the procurement process to go, what are the environmental, social, economic issues associated with this? Then we took all of the words that came out of this exercise over 50 commodity groups, and we dropped those into a Wordle, in the same way as we did earlier on. That's what it looked like. So, first Wordle was environmental sustainability strategies, which was talking about environmental negatives mostly, consumption of energy, water, waste, etc. And then what we did is we looked at, in a positive as well as a negative way, what are the opportunities in the supply chain, environmentally, social and economically, positive and negative, and that's what the word looked like. Does it look different to the other one? Tell me how, quickly. Just shout something out for me. People-based. So, it's much more socially focused. Absolutely. People are implicit to everything we buy, whether they're transporting it, whether they're making it, whether they're planting it, whether they're manufacturing it, whether they're disposing of it. We're social animals in a social world. We rely on the environment for the planet to function, but it's about human interaction, so why wouldn't the social dimension come out in the procurement process? So thank you, yeah, socially focused. What else? Two more things. I know it's early on the morning and I'm pushing you really quickly straight off. Is it less busy, more busy? That's a massive clue. Sorry? There's fewer words and they're larger, aren't there? Yeah, it's a lot less cluttered. Now, as a procurement professional, and I go, where am I going to put my efforts? Where am I going to put my efforts on sustainable procurement? I'm going to put it in the areas that actually I can have an impact, which are most common over a larger number of commodities. Does that make sense? If I'm going to set myself a target, right? If I'm going to set myself a target on sustainability within procurement, then wouldn't I set my target based around where I can have most influence and impact across the largest selection of commodity areas? Wouldn't that make sense? Yeah? So actually, this process for the procurement professionals in HE said, actually, I know everyone's talking about lots of different targets out there because we have lots of targets from community engagement to waste reduction to energy consumption, etc. But where does procurement add value? What can we influence? What can we contribute? And actually it provided a mechanism to do that. It provided also a mechanism for HE to actually start to identify their own targets as a sector. So that simple process of understanding the environmental, social, economic impacts positive and negative. And the reason I'm going to emphasize that one more time is when this was shown within the organizations themselves and said, this is the value we can add, the community people in the university went, that's fantastic, because we're interested in local spend, because we want to measure that and do an economic impact report locally. We're interested in actually how we get people back into employment, because that's part of the Social Value Act, or our contribution to social value. So actually it resonated with other groups within the institution, not just the environmental sustainability professionals. What it actually meant is procurement, and this is a key point from this initial session, established sustainability commitments were there: energy, waste, carbon, sustainable travel, etc. Supply chain opportunities, actually in that approach, are not only energy and carbon, which we know about, don't we? We know the Carbon Disclosure Project, we know that push on carbon. I have a different set of views on carbon per se. It's a really important measure, absolutely. But there are others as well. There are others in terms of supply chain, and that's around transport emissions, which is carbon related, obviously. But there's these social ones that came out really strongly: job creation, local spend, SME development. This signalled a bit of a shift in the HE sector. And that approach, actually, in terms of procurement leading the way, can fit into whatever your organisation is talking about. So, does your organisation talk about social responsibility? A little show of hands, actually, just to give me a feel. Do you talk about social responsibility in your organisation? Yeah, few. Is it corporate responsibility with anyone? A couple more there. Civic responsibility? Yeah. Do you just talk about them all?
Well, up to standards authority for policing, so...
Yeah, absolutely. There we go. That explains that one. So, social value. Is anyone getting in on the social value? Yeah, a few. For me, that's the way forward, I have to be honest. If I was going to walk into an organisation now and they're saying, what should we be doing on our sustainability strategy? What should we be calling it? The last one I did, I got them to talk about sustainable social value. I know they're just buzzwords put together, but it resonates quite strongly with me: sustainable social value, community impact, supplier engagement. Point I'm making here is whatever your organisation is talking about, when you drill down, procurement's contribution is these things. Whatever you buy, whatever you make, whatever you do, your contribution is locked around here. We're calling for a shift more around this area and enhancing the positive as well. Sherry.
I don't know how it works with you guys, but in HE, they use the term back-end function when they talk about procurement. Do you use that? Is it back-end function? In some of the universities we work with and visit, the procurement guys literally are in the basement. They get the darkest offices, they're kind of out the way. Something that makes the case for procurement to be able to lead the way has been really exciting and well received by the procurement guys. For once, bringing them out of their basement environment and making a contribution to their strategic objectives. Not that they wouldn't anyway, but to start to be asked about something other than just the bottom line. Being part of the conversation about, when we talk about value for money, what do we actually mean by value? And I think that's what the point you're going to make about social value. The procurement teams have really enjoyed flexing their mental muscles around, if we got to decide what value meant beyond just the financial, what would that look like? I think what we've done, and I think what we do when we use this session with universities and other organisations, is we make the case for procurement being absolutely key to sustainability for an organisation. Not just sustainability, but particularly sustainability. I think we make that case. I think it's a bit of a no-brainer. I think when we get the opportunity to talk to procurement people, they get this. And there are so many other peripheral benefits from team development, having something that can prioritise activity, loads and loads of other benefits. So why, and this is a genuine question, not necessarily to you, but why is it so often the case that sustainable procurement is only something that's considered when there's something new that pops up? I was trying to Google a picture for, you know, the fairground game, whack-a-mole. Do you have whack-a-mole down? We're down south, aren't we? Whack-a-mole. You whack a mole, and every time you whack one, another mole pops up. And at the moment, the mole that's popped up is Modern Slavery Act. But there are others. And in universities, because of the student body being relatively well resourced and supported to campaign, these can pop up all the time. So why does it take a thing to pop up, a mole to pop up, for procurement to respond? Why is that okay? So, modern slavery is the current example, and lots of you nodded saying that you were looking at it and were interested in it. New piece of legislation, which always panics people. Requirements receiving royal assent on the 26th of March last year. Organisations with a global turnover of more than 36 million have a disclosure obligation. They have to produce a statement. They have to articulate how they are responding to this new piece of legislation to prevent modern slavery in their supply chains. Are we familiar with the legislation? It almost doesn't matter what this is. As far as I'm concerned, it's a mole, and Jimmy and I had some discussion about it. It's a thing. And we've seen this in universities elicit various responses, and some of them look like this. And when you've had other issues pop up, you might have responded in similar ways. And the responses have gone like this. There's a new piece of legislation. What has happened has been that the letter about this new piece of legislation and the obligation has gone right to the very top. It's gone to the Vice-Chancellor, and then it's gone to the Finance Director. So it's not instantly been a procurement issue, it's been Finance Director level. So it's been on the radar at the top. So that's when panic kicks in properly, I think. Right, what we're going to do, we're going to do this, we're going to set up a task group or a committee. Okay, let's do that. And let's write to all of the suppliers and see what they're doing. Okay, we can do that. We'll hold an event, but we know really that when we hold events, it's usually the same people that come, and probably the ones that are doing things that they shouldn't be wouldn't come to an event to tell us about those things that they're doing that they shouldn't. What about if we have a charter, let's have a charter or a new standard or something that we can get our suppliers to sign up to, and we'll charge them for doing it so that it covers the admin cost. All of these proper examples that we've seen. They'll send us, our suppliers have to send us a policy commitment. They have to demonstrate on paper so we can evidence what they're doing. We're never going to check it. They could all cut and paste the same Googled version of the internet, but we'll ask for something and we'll tick a box. We've already got a checklist, we'll just add this on, it can just be another thing. Basically, let's find a way to do as little as possible. It's just a mole, we've just got to whack it, and then we're going to be on to the next one. Any of your organisations respond in a similar way when something pops up? And you're laughing, so I know some of you...
Don't make them say it, that's unfair.
Isn't it? Well, that's why you bring me. We know this happens, and it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes having a group, an action group, is a really useful way to get this started. It can be a little bit frustrating if every time a mole pops up you've got to go through this process. Is that an efficient way to run a team or a function? We've come to see this. It frustrates, I think it frustrates us more than if you're in a team, you just kind of get used to that's just what happens. If you go in and see teams repeating this same pattern over and over again, you've kind of got an obligation to say, really? is this how you're going to keep doing this? Do it like this the first time, maybe the second time, but universities have had things pop up with vocal students, sometimes chaining themselves to desks, sometimes barricading themselves into Vice-Chancellor's offices, protesting about stuff, which, however small that number is, it's on the radar there. New issues on a regular basis, workers' rights, living wage, electronics watch, child labour. The stretch that I was talking about in terms of how the issues broaden the procurement issues, the procurement team, when they're talking about things like, and it's kind of the link between, or the edge point between HR and procurement, the people issues, the wages, some of the universities doing protests at the point at which the lowest paid workers have earned the same amount as the Vice-Chancellor would get, and it's about February or something, the difference in wages. Lots of these things that are people issues, that are not just stuff we buy, making it onto the radar. They're all moles. So do we respond to each of these individually and spend time having those conversations, talking through what we can do, signing up to whatever the latest thing is that usually costs the procurement team money? Or do we think about a more mature response? Can you guess which we're sort of working towards? What if we considered, rather than, oh, that's a risk, what should we do? How can we protect ourselves? What if we actually saw it as an opportunity to develop our teams, an opportunity to review our processes and practices, so that next time we can just point at the things that we're already doing because we know we've got confidence in our excellent processes and practices. Does that make sense? To me, it's just an absolute no-brainer. And we've seen this work, and it's really interesting. So the head of procurement at Manchester has been and he almost considers them buzzing around with the new thing. And to start with, we've been working with them for a little while now, and to start with, he was genuinely interested in our thoughts on electronics watch, for example, or whatever the thing was. Students are asking me about this, how do I respond? How do I respond to this one issue? Having worked with him for a couple of days, the team really get it, it's properly embedded. His response now, whatever that issue is, this is how we do it, and I've got confidence in my processes that whatever you are suggesting, or whatever risk you've identified, we cover it like this. And that confidence has been a massive step change for him and for that organisation. And it's been really interesting to watch, and it just makes life easier for everybody. So what would that look like if we used it as an opportunity rather than a risk? We look at those new issues and find a way to roll them into existing business processes. We're not talking about let's start again and put all of these things in from the start. We're talking about reviewing what's there. We're talking about owning risk, not just a particular issue, but actually owning the fact that as we've identified, we know that there's risk in the supply chain, but that there's also opportunity and changing the narrative slightly. We'll talk about engagement and that change in the narrative, and Jimmy started to talk about it, and that balance between using very negative, cut, reduce, that language of negative change, relative to that language of opportunity. Come with us, this is an opportunity, rather than, oh, stay clear of us because we're the guys that are responsible for risk. They're really very different things. And you can use that as an opportunity to demonstrate excellence. We've identified that talking about sustainable procurement, we believe, and we've demonstrated this a lot, that it's the same as excellent procurement. Demonstrate excellent procurement as sustainable procurement. And do what you're doing now. Have a look, see what other people are doing. Look and horizon scan and find out the best ways to embed this in the process. But understand how it relates to your business strategy. So folding it in, that's what a mature response looks like. Not seeing it as something to panic and have to whack, but seeing it as something that you actually have got ownership of and you just fold that into a mature business response. Does that make sense? We think it does. And it takes us here.
Okay. I want to do this relatively quickly so we keep on time. You will all have your own business processes and systems. I think one of the key points Sherry made there, I want to reiterate, is we see no difference between excellent procurement and sustainable procurement. I was with an organisation last week, spent 3 days reviewing all of their procurement processes to identify where we embed sustainability more smartly, where we do the impact analysis, where we look at the opportunities. And what happened after the 3 days? We actually decided to, the next time we get together for another 3 days, is to rewrite their procurement processes. Because by identifying where sustainability fits in, identified that they knew there were some flaws in the procurement process they wanted to put right. Does that make sense? You can't embed sustainability into a poor process. So it forces you to review the process. So that's why we believe sustainable procurement and excellent procurement are the same thing. Last 5 minutes, and then we should have a few minutes for questions. So the approach to HE taking are moving from supplier development to supplier engagement. There was a pilot of an online tool developed with Manchester, which basically was a mechanism to not ask their suppliers for policies anymore, but to help the suppliers develop their own sustainability action plans for free. Okay, so it's not about just asking for policies. I believe there's an implementation gap. You can show me your policy all you like. I'm really interested in what you're doing. And actually, where you can't explain what you're doing, then I'm not interested in your policy. It's a box ticking for me, so it's what you're actually doing. It's been developed a collaboration between those 3 acronyms, our purchasing consortia, which I'm sure you're familiar what purchasing consortia is, and there's been a 4th one that's joined now as well. So it enables all the higher education sector suppliers to develop their own action plan, and the action plan helps them demonstrate how they consider sustainability as part of their organisation, and that's built into the procurement process. It supports supplier development. Now, sometimes we implement supplier programs that are a cost to the suppliers. I fundamentally disagree with that. And I'm more than happy to have the conversation at length with anyone else on that. I really do. Why should we make sustainability a cost to our suppliers? It's a cost anyway to them in many ways. Why should us as procurement professionals be doing that? What we should be doing is supporting them because they're implicit to the value of our business. So actually we're not about adding extra costs if we can help it. So the HE sector fortunately took the approach, this has to be free to suppliers. And what it does is, in terms of supplier engagement on sustainability, it's more of an offer than an ask. We're going to give you this and we're going to get what we need from it, rather than fill in another questionnaire, rather than send us another this. It's actually, here's something to help you. It turns a risk into an opportunity, because as whether identifying risk, we're identifying the value that's implicit in the supply chain, and it provides a powerful evidence-based. And actually the tool, which is a simple online tool that they're using, folds modern slavery into that. So actually all of the sustainable issues they might want to deal with the supply chain are all in one place. And it's about their story rather than a long list of questions. So it's a simple, to summarise, what they've actually launched is a simple online platform which goes across purchasing consortia and across universities. In 4 weeks, that tool's been out. This is really new. 4 weeks, there's only 2 or 3 universities that have started to send it out to key suppliers. There's 300 companies registered, 190 plans because it takes in place. They've already got nearly 3,000 commitments to action to different types of sustainability, and there's already 250 sort of pieces of evidence that's been collected. That's within 4 weeks of them launching it. The current sign-ups to the tool are 4 purchasing consortia and 20 universities in 4 weeks are sending it out. So it's still at the early pilot phase. What the tool does is it allows them to capture data as well, so they understand that the priority issues are social, environmental and economic. What they also have found out is that in the tool, most of the people completing it are micro, small and medium-sized businesses. I think the reason for this, and we have some large businesses in the room, and I'm not going to put any of them on the spot, but I know the large businesses in this room get asked about sustainability all the time, and you've got teams of people to respond. Yeah, it's an industry within your business, isn't it? Is that fair? You have massive reports, massive teams. The small, micro, medium businesses don't have that, and actually it supports them as much as anything else. The sectors that are actually self-identifying in the tool, those are the highest returners of filling in the tool. And HR doesn't stand for HR in terms of human resources, it's HR in terms of high risk, in terms of modern slavery. So the top 5 sectors identified in modern slavery: catering, computers, textiles and construction. So actually these are self-selecting as well. So there's 4 weeks data which is showing this response. I'd say watch this space if you're interested. You can find out more information about it through HEPA, for example, but also through some of the consortia and lead institutions. They've taken quite a gamble, but what they're actually really doing is trying to push the idea that our role in terms of sustainable procurement is about developing our supply chain. It's about developing the supply chain, and by developing the supply chain, we're going to actually reduce risk in the long term, but also build and solidify those relationships. Modern slavery, as Sherry was saying, is just another issue to be folded into that engagement. That's the key point. Just another issue to be folded into that engagement. I'm going to add anything more. Do you want to add one more final comment, Sherry? And we'll...
I think, we asked the question, what would it look like if we turned a risk into an opportunity? And I think we were starting to articulate what we think that could look like. If you take something that's challenging supplier engagement on particular issues and find a way to do something with it that helps the suppliers and helps you, for me that's an example of that. So it's not a question to just throw out into the ether. I think we're also trying to plug that gap a little bit. So for me, it's that, and the fact that we've got so many in such a small space of time speaks to a need. It speaks to a desire to look at that opportunity and actually say, yes, we can do it on Santa Barbara. But we can. There is something that the procurement professionals can really contribute positively to this agenda.
So lastly, for consideration, because our time's up, and obviously we're around today, quite happy to chat in more detail around anything we've said, is a reflection for you, to be perfectly honest, is to think about, in a corporate context, because we've talked about HE today and we're acutely aware of that, but we believe there's a lot of resonance and carry across, is it possible to see the Modern Slavery Act as an opportunity? And if we did see it as an opportunity, and we spoke about it with that language, that positive language, rather than this is a risk because it's legislation, we just need to respond, and we need to get that statement out there and then do the minimum. I'm not suggesting you do that for a second, but can we see it as an opportunity, which is very different? And secondly, how do you ensure that supplier engagement in modern slavery doesn't have to be repeated 6 months later on another issue? And if we can see it as an opportunity and make sure we put things in place now to respond to this issue that are easily replicable and not resource intensive, because no one in this room has unlimited resources, then isn't that a smart way to move forward in the long term? We're out of time now, so we won't take any questions because we're around today. Unless there's anything really burning, I'm not even going to say that, I'm going to move on. We're going to stop. Hope that was of interest and of some use. Thank you very much, Jason, and thank you for your time.